Okay, Julius, now that we've discussed those kind of administrative items, I want to move into the substance of our fact gathering interview now. So I'd like to let you know what I have pictured for today's meeting and kind of what our agenda is going to look like. So first off, I want to get a quick and brief rundown of what the problem is that you've come to see me about today. And in that preliminary portion of the interview, I'm also going to be asking you about any goals or concerns that you may have regarding the issue, just kind of at the outset. Second, I'm going to ask that you bring us through a more thorough account of the facts of your case in a timeline manner. So step by step, you'll have the opportunity to tell me kind of everything that has happened that's brought you kind of to this moment to my office now. So that's the second portion of the interview. In the third portion of our interview, I'm going to ask you to parse through some details of the facts that you will have already given me. And I'm going to be asking you a few more pointed or specific questions on, specific topics that I feel, deserve a little bit more time. And then finally, once those kind of three sections of our interview are complete, I think it'll be appropriate for us to kind of conclude and talk about our next steps. And I'm going to try to remind you of where we are in the process throughout the interview. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay, perfect. And so before we move on, please know that I'll be taking notes just for purposes of clarity and organization. So if I pause or I'm looking down at all, that's likely what's happening. I'm also going to try not to interrupt you throughout the process. However, I may jump in just to clarify things here and there to ensure accuracy. Okay?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay, and then one more thing I just want to preface the process with is that today is really about hearing from you and your story and gathering as much information as possible. So in that sense, I just want to make sure that you feel an open, kind of comfortable line of communication between you and I. I want to make sure that you understand, I've already explained, the confidentiality that I owe you, as well as, my duty to act in your best interest as your lawyer. But I really do want you to feel free to ask questions along the way and, not be shy with anything. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So let's move into the first phase of our interview here. I'm really just looking for a brief overview of the issue that you're facing. I want to get an overall sense in a few sentences of what the main problem is. So with that said, tell me a bit about why you're here today.
Yeah, well, first, thank you, because I've been waiting to sort of let this off my chest. So basically, last week I received this letter in the mail, and I opened it and looked pretty official. And I, based on my understanding, it said that I have to remove my pool. So I have a pool in my backyard. I have to remove my pool within 30 days at my own expense. And then the other thing was that if there's any damage, okay, let me go back. So essentially there's an easement in my backyard, right? So I build a pool, they want me to remove the pool. And then if there's any damage done by the installation or the removal, I also have to pay for that. So basically that's why I wanted to come see you here today, sort of see what legal options I may have. I don't want to remove the pool, but I also don't know what my legal options are. So that's essentially, I guess, the main purpose. Yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful. And I understand that receiving a letter like that can be very difficult and stressful, and hopefully we can gather some information today throughout our interview to kind of come to a suitable solution for you. So aside from the kind of legal issue here, which you've deemed as the removal of the pool in this letter that you've received, I'm just wondering, are there any other objectives or interests that you have? And when I ask about objectives or interests, I'm talking about non-legal objectives or interests. So, this could include perhaps like a relationship that you would want to keep intact with, the opposing party here, or any personal pressures you're facing because of this issue. So can you tell me a little bit about any objectives or interests in that way that you might have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so like I said, I don't want to have to remove the pool. I'm sure we'll get into this a bit later, but definitely don't want to remove the pool. In terms of like relationship, I mean, I think my neighbor already dislikes me for some reason. I don't know why. I've been nothing but pleasant to him. I wouldn't want to sort of make the relationship worse with my neighbor. Somehow, I think my neighbor is the one that sort of called the city and informed them about the pool. So I think that's the one thing. Like, I don't want to get into some sort of like neighborly you know battle or fight. And the other thing is that I'd really want to keep the cost low. I've already spent quite a bit on the pool. So whether that's legal cost or sort of, I hope not, but if I'm forced to remove the pool, I really would not want to pay much, if at all, for any cost. So I guess cost and just not pissing off my neighbor even further would be any other goals.
Okay. Those are very commendable goals, not wanting to anger or upset your neighbor. Can't really control who we live beside and who are our neighbors. So I completely understand that goal of yours. And that helps me kind of get an idea of your priorities and your goals at the outset of this. So thank you. And you did state that, you said, oh, we might get into this later. Don't worry, we will be getting, into the details, in the next kind of portions of our interview. And so just in order to keep me up to date here, can you tell me anything about any actions you've taken so far to deal with the situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've tried to I've went to my neighbor's house basically, and I've offered to relocate the easement. So there's a hydro cable underground, and I've asked my neighbor if we can relocate this into his backyard because he doesn't have a pool. But unfortunately, he obviously needs to say yes because it's his property. He said no. I've tried a few times. I've tried to pay whatever costs, because again, I don't want to remove the pool. So I guess long story short, I've just basically tried to, one way or another, try to relocate the conduit, like the hydro cable. But my neighbor, unfortunately, just doesn't want to hear it. So that's the only thing I've done. And then I just came to see you today.
Okay, that makes sense, and that must be frustrating, to kind of go back and forth with your neighbor and have, decisions about your own property kind of subject to the consent of your neighbor. That can be very difficult. So, I understand, and I can only imagine how frustrated you are. So thank you for that kind of preliminary information. It's very helpful to get a sense of what we're dealing with. Just to make sure I understood correctly, I'm just going to go ahead and summarize these initial comments from you, and then you can just let me know if there's anything that I've missed, although you will have a chance to kind of delve into the facts more thoroughly in just a couple moments. So to summarize, you received a letter in the mail, which sounds like an injunction to remove the pool from your backyard within 30 days because the property is subject to an easement. And so specifically in the letter, you've received, a note to rectify those damages, and you're here seeking legal options on kind of what to do next. We've talked about your objectives. Obviously, you would like to keep the pool that you said you've spent quite a bit on installing. We talked about your hope not to anger your neighbor because tensions seem already high with your neighbor. And financial expenses are an issue here. You've already, again, spent quite a bit on the pool. We're hoping to not spend anything really to be able to get out of this, or at least keep our expenses to a minimum. Is that make sense? That's kind of everything you've expressed.
Yeah, no, that sounds perfect. You've captured it. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So that's good. Great. I've got notes on that. So now that you've given me an overview of the problem, I want to shift gears into the second phase of the interview here. And at this point, I'm going to invite you to give me a rundown, step by step, from start to finish, in your own words, of everything that's led you here in this case. And I want you to think of this portion of the interview as a timeline that you're explaining to me. And this is going to help me get a better understanding of the facts in a clear and logical way, just for my own notes and things like that. So in your own words, please go ahead and tell me everything that's happened up until this point, step by step. And you can start where you feel the facts begin. Please include as much detail as you can. Even if you think it may not be legally important, don't worry. If I feel that something is not relevant or for our purposes, or that it's too much detail, I'll just try and jump in and let you know.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So I purchased this property in Latchford in 2010. Been living there since. In 2012. Sorry, let me get back. I purchased in October of 2012. I purchased the property, and then in 2014 is when I decided to build a pool. Now, before I built the pool, I also had a shed and a carport built, and also like I want to say like an addition to my house. And I received some permits from the city. So I went to the city and received these permits to construct like this portion of the house, the carport and the shed. And just to go back a bit, I guess. So when I purchased the property, there was actually an easement registered on title. And within this easement, there's basically this underground conduit. The house is like a hydro cable. And it provides electricity to my neighbor. So that's how he gets the power. And as far as I'm aware, this easement has been registered on title since June 1972. So quite a while. And I believe it was February 2000 when the town, the town sold the easement to Latchford Hydro. But the town and Latchford Hydro basically still have an interest, which is why I think they both sent the letter as like one. So the letter that I received that I told you about earlier, it was signed by both of them. The easement is like about 10 feet wide, as I alluded to earlier. And basically, about 2 years later, when I decided to build the pool, I built the pool right on top. I said, let me just build it right here, like a nice big pool, very high tech stuff. And then, here we are today, right? I think, yeah, sorry, just a little frustrating. I really don't want to remove this pool. Like I spent quite a bit of money, and I just feel really upset because, now the town hydro are telling me that I essentially, violated their easement, and I just don't understand why. So yeah, that's basically, I guess, that's the story. Yeah.
Right. And I can only imagine, I understand how frustrating that is to invest and spend money on, your own property. And that's why easements are so frustrating, because it's your property, but, through a technicality and through the easement on the property, someone completely outside of you has, some sort of right to dictate what goes into that property. So I understand how that's frustrating, and I completely get it. With regards to the timeline here, I just want to parse through a little bit. So you mentioned that you had purchased the property in 2012, and in early 2014, you had constructed the pool. You mentioned that in between that time, you had a permit granted by the city for the shed and the carport and the home extension. Can you outline when you had that permit granted for the city and the shed? So between 2012 and 2014, when was the permit granted?
Not too long after I bought the property. I believe it was in 2013, like early 2013 is when I got the permit. And then I think I may have started like building later on when the weather got a bit warmer. So yeah, early 2013 got the permit. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, again, I just want to fill in another short gap here. So you mentioned in early 2014, you constructed the pool. And then you mentioned that you received a letter from the city. So when did you receive, or you received an infraction, right, for constructing the pool? When did you receive that in relation to, you know, the pool being constructed in early 2014? What happened after that?
Hmm. Yeah, so I built the pool in 2014, and we're now what year is this? Like 2021. So I received a letter just like a week ago, just last
Okay.
week, right? So it's been a while, which I think that's really like an interesting idea, right? You know, it's been years. Where was the city like since 2014, right? The pool is there. It's in my backyard. It's pretty, you know, it's I'm not trying to hide the fact that I have a pool, right? So yeah, so last week is when I received a letter.
Okay. What else happened in between early 2014 constructing the pool and receiving the letter last week in April of 2021? What else
Hmm.
happened that you know think that you feel is important for the case?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, so I built the pool in 2014. I think completed like late 2014, and you know, been living there with ever since with my wife. I have a dog, Caesar, so you know, loves jumping in the water and just playing around, splashing everywhere. Um, since then, I think, like I mentioned earlier, um, I think it was my neighbor who essentially called the city. So my neighbor and I, for some reason, we don't really get along that well. I couldn't tell you why. I don't know. He just doesn't seem to like me very much. Um, so that's why I think it's my neighbor who essentially, you know, called me out, because it's been years since I built the pool, right? 2014, you know, 6, 7 years later, right? Um, and I haven't done like anything else, right? I haven't like heard anything from the city. I guess the other thing I would want to add is that, you know, I consider myself like a law-abiding citizen, right? I didn't go out of my way to want to, you know, violate this easement. The reason I decided to build this easement was because, or sorry, this pool was because, you know, I figured it was okay. Like the city specifically allowed me to build these other, you know, like the carport and, you know, the shed and whatnot on top of the easement, right? So I feel like just by that logic, I sort of came to the conclusion that, okay, I can just build this pool, right? And the other thing I should mention is that uh, I did pay a fine, right, for this, um, for, you know, for building the pool on top of the easement, which is fine. I get that I didn't ask for a permit, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I can't think of anything else right now.
Okay. So that's everything you've said so far has been really helpful, and you know, I can only imagine how difficult it is to parse through these details however many years later. So you have a great memory, and thank you for that. I just want to revisit something that you said, because as you're speaking, I'm kind of building this timeline in my notes, right? So you mentioned that you had a fine. Did that involve pleading guilty? Can you talk a little bit more about the fine and situate it time-wise? Did you, you know, when did the fine occur? And tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it was about 3 years later. So about I think in 2017 is when I received a letter from the city, which basically said that I had built the pool without a permit. Now, this violation didn't mention the easement or anything, right? Which is weird to me, because I don't know. To me, that just makes no sense. So anyway, so they sent me this letter. I can't remember the fine. I can probably I think I still have it at home, so I can definitely check and get back to you if that's important. But yeah, so in 2017 I received the violation, and you know, I went to City Hall basically, and you know, I was a little pissed off, like you know, but I sort of owned up to it, like I built the pool without a permit, which I shouldn't have done, but that still doesn't mean that I don't feel like I'm being wronged here, because now they're accusing me of building on top of this easement when they have allowed me to do so before. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. I understand how difficult it can be dealing with, you know, a larger bureaucratic body, and there are forms, and you know there are certain protocols that you need to follow, and it can be really frustrating, especially if you're not exactly sure, you know, what the fine is that you're paying, or it can be complicated for sure.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go ahead and summarize the timeline that you've given me. But before I do that, I just want to ask you, is there anything else in this kind of timeline summary that you feel is important to add?
Mm, I think, did I mention that the easement has been registered on title since 1972?
You did
Um,
mention that.
okay, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
so
I
I
think
have that.
yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I don't have any, I'm trying to remember if there are any other dates. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I don't, yeah, if something comes up, I'll let you know for sure.
Okay. Okay, and so just to confirm, I just want to kind of highlight a larger gap here. So to confirm, between early 2014 when you constructed the pool and last week in April 2021 when you received this letter from the city and Hydro, um, I have in 2017 that you received the infraction, that that they had realized that you'd built the pool and you paid a fine. Was there anything else that happened between early 2014 when you built the pool and last week in April 2021? Anything else that happened, that you feel is of note that you'd like to tell me?
Let me see if I can remember. No, I think that's, yeah, I can't really, nothing comes to mind. I think I've told you. Yeah, so got the notice. I think I paid the violation pretty soon after I received it. So I think it was in the same year, 2017 is when I went and paid it, maybe even within a month. So yeah, that's the only other like detail, I guess, but I'm not sure how relevant that is.
No, that's very relevant. Thank you. And the only reason I'm kind of pushing and parsing here is just because it's a long period of time, right? 6 years between 2014 and 2021, even longer, I think 6 or 7 years. So that's the only reason why I'm just pushing a little bit, just to make sure that that we're being thorough. So I'm going to go ahead and summarize what you've told me. It's been very informative, and I understand that these discussions can be stressful, and that you're dredging up memories from years ago, so it can be difficult. So let me know if I've missed anything or if I've misconstrued anything. So I have the property was purchased in 2012 by you, and there was an easement registered on title. There's a hydro cable, we said, that is going from your property to your neighbor's property to provide electricity. We know that easement that was registered has been registered since 1972. And in the year 2000, it was sold from the city to Hydro. However, you've mentioned that the city did retain some interest in the easement. Then in early 2013, you were granted the permit by the city to build the shed, the carport, and the home extension that you mentioned. And then in the following year, in early 2014, you told me that you had began to construct the pool and that it was finished towards the end of 2014. You thought that this was okay. You didn't get a permit, but you thought that it was okay because the shed and the carport and the home extension had been approved previously. Then in 2017, you received an infraction stating that the city had realized that the pool was built without a permit. The infraction did not make any mention of the easement, and you told me that you pled guilty. You paid the fine right away within a month in the year of 2017. And then the most recent kind of thing that has brought us here today is the letter that you received from the city, which from the city and Hydro Joint, which outlined, I believe at the beginning, you had told me that it outlined some sort of deadline of 30 days for you to, proceed with some sort of action or respond. So that's what I have in my notes here in this summary. Is there anything that I've missed, or is there anything else you would like to add?
No, you haven't missed anything. That was really good. I think the only thing I would add is that something I should have probably mentioned or sort of like highlight is that I'm willing to pay to relocate this easement, right? I think that's like I feel like that's a very viable solution. And if it wasn't for my neighbor being highly unreasonable, um, I think this could be easily solved. So, but yeah, otherwise that was perfectly captured. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to take a note of that. Okay. Okay, Julius, thank you for that step-by-step account of the facts. It's really helped me kind of situate us where we are in the case and kind of where we stand in the present. I want to now shift our focus into the third phase of our interview process today. You've given me the timeline of everything that's happened. I want us now to parse through some of the details of the story together in order to ensure I have a firm and accurate understanding of everything that's happened. This is going to help me gather a little more detail so that when we formulate a strategy moving forward in our next meeting, perhaps, it's going to help me formulate a strategy moving forward in our next meeting, perhaps when we meet to kind of discuss what our options are going forward. So once we're done kind of going over these more detailed questions, that's when, like I said, we'll move forward and it'll help us build a more robust legal position. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, that works for me. Yep.
Okay, and so just a reminder that I'm going to continue to take notes as we go, and I'll try to interrupt you as little as possible, but I may jump in here and there just for purposes of clarity or to verify certain information. And I'm going to ask that you give me as much detail as possible throughout this phase of the interview. Okay?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, so there are 3 topics that I'd like to focus on in detail, one at a time. And so the first topic I'd like to focus on and kind of parse through the details in is your previous permit for the shed, the carport, and the home extension. The second topic I want to discuss with you is the infraction, like the fine and the guilty plea. And third, I want to talk about the offer you made to have the hydro line relocated, which you discussed briefly at the beginning of the interview. So I want to discuss that a little further. So let's start with the first topic, which is the previous permit. So you mentioned that the town granted you a previous permit to build a shed, a carport, and the home extension. You recall that, right?
Right, yes. Yep.
Okay, so I want to go back and parse through the details of you obtaining the permit to build those structures. So go ahead and tell me about the permits to build those structures and what the town said and when they were granted. As I said, please go into as much detail as possible.
Okay, sure. So yeah, like I said, I think early 2013 is when so let me go a bit back further. I had been planning to essentially build this shed, which my wife hates. Same thing with the carport. She never wanted that, but we agreed that we're gonna have to build these. So in early 2013 is when I went to City Hall and asked for these permits, which they were granted. Obviously, I was way too cold to start building early then. So I think construction started quite late, when the weather started getting a bit warmer. And, I think one thing that I remember is that I was quite surprised how pretty straightforward the whole like grant and getting getting the permit was. I thought there'd be a bit more red tape, I think. Which wasn't the case at that point, especially because it was essentially 3 independent structures, right? So I think that was one thing that I found quite surprising. But otherwise, it was pretty straightforward process. Went there, applied. I think I had to wait about a week. I remember sending in the application, dropped it off in person, and then just a week later, I got a notification that I had to go pick up the package which contained the permits. So
Okay, excellent. Thanks for providing, that answer. I'd like to jog your memory a little more. What happened when your application to build the previous structures were approved?
Mhm. What happened? So one thing that I recall, like was yesterday, was that my wife was not very happy, even though we had both sort of come to an agreement. She did not want me to, I think deep down she still didn't want me to do it. I think she was holding out that perhaps the city would deny them, and then that would be a win for her. But I remember she was not happy. Um, I remember when I got them, I think I started just planning, like how should I start contacting contractors and sort of getting some estimates about the construction and so on. Yeah, I think that was what I basically occupied myself for about a week or so, just sort of looking into like costs. I had a pretty good idea before, but I wasn't sure what I would get the permit. But since I got it now, it was real, so I started looking into costs.
Okay. Um, okay, that's very helpful. And so, in order to make sure we get a proper assessment of your case and how we should move forward, it's important for me to take the time to really hone in on the facts. So, can you tell me a little bit more about the permit to build the shed, the carport, and the home extension? I know I'm pressing here. I'm asking, the same question a few times, but it is going to be helpful, right, to gather this information.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, let's see, what else can I say? Like I said, I expected a bit more like a challenge, I guess, to get the permit. That wasn't the case. The other thing is that, I like I said, I knew about the easement that was that was registered on title. And to be honest, I thought perhaps there might be an issue there, right? Because I knew basically all the three structures would, in one way or another, be on top of the easement area, right? Even though it's very small. And yeah, I think I just expected that I might have to like sort of deal with that aspect, just knowing that there's an easement registered on title of the property. Um, yeah, no, nothing. I think that's pretty much it about this. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so, is there anything else you can remember on the application or the process of obtaining those permits? What the town said once the permits were approved for the carport, and the shed, and the home extension.
Hmm. Yeah. So, like I said, I dropped off the application. It wasn't too long again, surprisingly. And when I picked it up, it was basically just handed to me by like a clerk. I don't think they knew what was in the. It was like this, this pretty big envelope. And I went home and opened it. Actually, no, I opened it on the way. I just wanted to see, whether I got the permits or not. But yeah, that's pretty much it. They didn't say anything else. Like it was pretty, straightforward. Just very, yeah. Like there was no other communication, I guess, with the city or anything like that. So.
Okay. Okay. So that's really helpful, and I thank you for giving me a detailed description of everything that happened. I just want to ask you a few more pointed questions on this topic before we move on. So, did the approval by the town include any reference to a future right to build on the
It's a
property?
good, yeah, it's a good question. So do you mean like in the permit itself?
Yeah,
Okay.
in the permit itself that you received.
Mhm. No, I don't think so. There was no like other reference to anything else. It was pretty, I guess, confined to the three projects that I had requested to build. I mean, I can check. I can definitely check and let you know, but I'd say I'm pretty confident that that wasn't the case.
Okay. Um, yeah, so maybe I think I'll compile a list at the end of the interview, or perhaps have my legal assistant send one out just on each specific document that we've said that you can send my way, just to take a look at. But that makes sense. Now, did you receive any correspondences from any town employees advising you that you could build over the easement in the future?
Mm, trying to remember, because this was a while back.
Yeah, take your
I don't, th-
time.
yeah, I don't think so. I think, no, I don't think so actually. Again, the only thing was this huge envelope basically that contained the permits. And I think I may have received some very like generic information. I think they may send those to anyone that requests the permit. But it had like there was no reference to anything about my property or anything like that really. I think it was just like very general information. Perhaps maybe there was a change to like the regulations about how you go about obtaining the permit, but nothing referencing my property or the previous permits.
Okay, so there you said in the package though there was a document that let you know that there would be a change in the process of obtaining a permit to build in the future.
No, there was nothing like that in the document.
No, there wasn't. Okay.
No.
Okay, sorry, I must have misunderstood. Um, okay, and so was Hydro involved in the process of the approval of these structures at all?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I'm trying to remember whether I seen their like logo anywhere on the papers. I don't think
Yeah.
so. I think it was just the town, um, which is weird because I don't understand how they knew now about the whole thing. I guess they do keep in touch, but yeah, I don't think so. Just to answer your question.
Okay. Okay, and so my final question on the topic of the previous permit, on what date did the town grant the permit for those structures? I know you mentioned early 2013. Do you have a specific date on that?
Mhm. I want to say early February or maybe late January. But so pretty early. I don't have the exact specific date. Again, maybe this is something that I can get to you. I mean, I do have the permits, so not I can definitely give a copy to you. But I guess just for now, I want to say late January or early February.
Okay. Okay, so that's all very helpful. And again, thank you for humoring me on, facts that have taken place just years ago. So thank you. And so I'd like to take this time now to summarize what you've told me about the permit for the previous structures, just to ensure that I've understood everything correctly. And please let me know if I've missed anything. So we've established that in early 2013, about a year after you bought the house, you requested the permit for the shed, the carport, and the home extension at City Hall. It was approved, fairly simple and straightforward process to your surprise, you said. You mentioned that you went through, all the hoops that were placed there. You fulfilled each step that was outlined to you, and it took about a week, which is a great turnaround time. You mentioned that construction started mid 2013 and that you looked into planning and costs and everything once it was approved. We've established that there was no reference to a future right to build on the property within that kind of permit that was already granted to you. And so there was no reference of that in the permit itself, and there was no reference to that from any correspondence from the city or any employees of the city that told you that. And so it was mostly generic information in the permit. To your knowledge, Hydro was not involved in that process. And with regards to the specific date that you received the permit, you're thinking early February, late January. Hopefully I can get a copy of the permit. I'll organize that and we can have a clearer date on that. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell me about the previous permit or anything that I've missed here?
No, I think you've got everything, and yeah, I'll try my best to like send you the whatever documents, like the permits and stuff, as soon as I can. I can either drop them off or mail them to you. So.
Okay, great. So I guess we'll deal with that kind of at the conclusion of the interview. We can discuss that. So now that we've gotten more detail on the previous permit, it's time for us to now shift focus to our next topic. which is topic number 2 of 3 in this phase of the interview, if you'll recall. I want to talk about the infraction regarding the construction of the pool. So you mentioned that there was an infraction and you pleaded guilty for an infraction and paid a fine regarding the pool. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so please tell me everything you remember about that plea. I'd like you to include as much detail as possible, even if you may not think it's important for our purposes.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, let's see what is there to say. So I received this, I guess, notice or violation letter or fraction, whatever you want to call it, in the mail. I believe it was in 2016 or 17. I think maybe it's at 17. I can check again. I still have a copy, and
Okay.
basically said that I have built, a structure, so the pool, without a permit from the city, and that I'm in violation of whatever they cited, some regulation or bylaw. And I think I was a bit surprised at myself, actually, because I feel like I should have known better. I mean, I did it before. I asked for permits before, so why not for this time? So I didn't fight it. Maybe I should have, but I basically decided to just go for it. I went to City Hall and just made a payment. I can't remember the exact payment. Maybe like 1,500. I can't really recall, to be honest, but yeah. So went to City Hall and just made the payment. Maybe the week after I received the letter.
Okay, just taking note here. Thank you for your patience. I know it's taking notes frantically here. Okay, so this is a really important point for me to understand. This infraction, this guilty plea. So what else can you tell me about the guilty plea for that infraction? Think about it. Picture that day that you went down to the city. Tell me a little bit more about what happened that day.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I remember it was pretty warm because there was a lineup, and I was starting like to sweat waiting lineup. It was just this ridiculous lineup. And then as soon as it was pretty late actually in the workday, and government, so they closed at 5. And I actually did not even make the payment that first day when I went. So the city clerk just basically decided to close the window there on like a few people that were still left in the lineup. And I remember just being furious, spent all this time waiting. And then I went the next day very early, and I lined up early and I made the payment. I remember the city clerk being pretty rude. I think to everyone, I don't know, maybe it was because it was Friday or something, but pretty rude. And I made the payment, and basically like I was just questioning like how, whether I have to make this payment now, or like I was trying to find this information, but I just found the city clerk quite rude and not helpful. So I just decided not to ask questions and just made the payment and left. But I remember it was not like a very pleasant start that day.
Yeah, that's unfortunate to hear. I'm sorry you had, that kind of negative experience. It's always frustrating when you're dealing with, like a service counter where there are lots of rules and the person at the service counter is not very clear on those rules. So that must have been really frustrating. And I know having legal troubles, especially with your own property, can be difficult and stressful. So I appreciate you being so helpful during this process. Now, before I ask you a few more pointed questions, is there anything else you'd like to share with me, or anything else that you think might be important for me to know on that guilty plea?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I did wonder, like, even now I still wonder, like, whether I should have like hired a lawyer or something. But at the end of the day, like, I just felt, the money was not really an issue, so I just decided to make the payment and just kind of go about it. But yeah, I guess I just didn't really appreciate how I was treated by that city clerk that day.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry you had that experience. So I definitely have a kind of fuller picture now of the guilty plea there and the infraction. I just want to ask you a couple pointed questions as I did on our last topic. So when exactly did you plead guilty to the infraction? I think you had mentioned that it was. Can you clarify for me? It was a week after you had received the letter.
Yeah, about a week after. So I went, like I said, I think it was a week. So I went on a Friday, and because the city clerk just decided to close up shop early, so then I went on Monday. So I guess like about a week and like 7 days or whatever.
Right.
So
What
like the
month?
following Monday. Yeah. Right. I'm trying to remember. It was quite hot, so I want to say maybe like July, maybe June or July.
Okay,
I do
so
have a copy, and I can give it to you, but
sure. Right. So we'll say around summer of 2017 for now, just for the
mhm,
purpose of my notes.
okay.
Um, okay, and so I want to touch on this topic. You said you wished you would have, talked to a lawyer. Did you have a lawyer consult you before you entered that plea?
No, I did not know.
Okay, were you offered any sort of legal advice or anything like that?
No, especially not by the city clerk. I'm pretty sure you have just like you know said no, or I don't know, not be helpful.
Okay, sorry. Did you say that? Did you ask the city clerk for legal like to have access to legal advice and they said no, or do you mean? Can you just clarify that point? You just
Yeah,
didn't
no,
receive
sorry,
it, or
that I
you
was
asked it?
yeah, no, sorry, I was being confusing. So no, I mean I
No,
didn't
no.
ask, but I also felt like if I had asked, I'm pretty sure that city clerk would have not been helpful. So
Oh, I see what you mean now. Yeah, that makes sense. Based on what you've said, the clerk probably would have not been
mm,
helpful based on the experience that you had or that you're explaining to me. Um,
exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, my next question, did you ever receive correspondence from Hydro advising you on whether or not to enter into that plea or kind of acknowledging that plea at all for that matter?
Mhm. No, I've never heard from Hydro like until I received this letter, like with the injunction, like last week. That's the only sort of correspondence I've ever had from them, and even then, it was like a joint sort of letter with the town.
Okay. Okay, so as I did before, I just want to take a second and make sure that I have the facts right on this topic. So you received the notice in 2017, and you had built the structure without the permit, and you received that notice that you were in violation of a specific bylaw, which I suppose we'll take a look at once I have the infraction itself or a copy of the infraction. So you went to City Hall and you made the payment. I think you said it was about 1,500, or you're not completely sure, but it was about 1,500. And you made the payment quite promptly. You went a week after the infraction was issued, I believe. When you went to pay the ticket, it was late in the day. The clerk was closing up shop, even though you stood in line. You weren't able to pay the ticket that day. You went back the next day to make the payment. You said that the clerk was kind of rude to you, and that you had a few questions. You asked some questions but didn't get help, and you decided to just kind of, suck it up and make the payment. And so you weren't offered any legal advice, and you didn't consult with a lawyer or anything like that. And to your knowledge, Hydro was not involved, and we've kind of time-stamped, your payment of the infraction at around July of 2017. Is there anything else that you would add to that?
No, I think you've got everything. Like, yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's today. So before we move on to our next topic, there's nothing else, or is there anything else that you would want to tell me about the guilty plea at all?
Mm. No, nothing really. I think I've basically mentioned everything. I just remember sort of not being a pleasant experience when I went to the city clerk, but that's pretty much it. That's like the only thing that stands out.
Okay, that makes sense, and thank you for, like, I understand that's few years ago. So I really do appreciate you kind of humoring me, pressing you on these issues. And so thank you for your cooperation and your patience and your helpful information so far. Now that we've kind of been at this for some time, I want to situate you a little bit and remind you where we're at in the process. So you gave me that short overview of the problem. You've given me kind of the timeline approach to your story, step by step. And now we're parsing through a few specific topics from that story. So we've discussed in detail the previous permit that you applied for and were granted by the town. We've also discussed the nature of the hydro cable and, oh, sorry, I have just messed up my notes here. We've discussed, I'm gonna just start over because I don't want to confuse you. My apologies. Mm-hmm. So we've discussed in detail the permit that you received. And second, we discussed the guilty plea that you had entered into. And so now I want to move into our third detailed topic, which is your previous attempt to resolve the issue by offering to pay to relocate the underground conduit. And so this is something that you mentioned early on in the interview. I want to just parse through these details a little bit and get a little bit more information. So you mentioned that you did try to resolve this issue by offering to pay to relocate the underground conduit. And you mentioned that you'd be willing to do that. Is that correct?
That's correct, yep.
Okay, great. With that said, please tell me everything you remember about your efforts to make that offer.
Yeah, so essentially this idea all came through a friend, actually. One of my friends works in this industry. And he sort of proposed, like, why don't you just have the hydro cable relocated, right? So, he, again, like I said, he's an expert, and he looked at the area and sort of, like what it would look like, and essentially concluded that the hydro cable would have to be just basically moved like a few feet onto my neighbor's backyard, like property, right? But of course, that's my neighbor's property, and I have to, ask for, for their consent. And I thought, that's a great idea, right? Like I, just move the hydro cable, and that way, the hydro would never have to need access in my own backyard if they wanted to service the cable. Of course, as I mentioned, my neighbor basically said no. I don't know why. He just essentially has refused to allow me to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's very very stressful and very frustrating. I want to push your memory a little more. What else do you think I should know about your offer to pay to relocate the hydro line?
Yeah, so I went again after my friend suggested this. I thought it was a great idea. I went to my neighbor, knocked on the door, and basically, explained to him what the whole thing. And I said that it would be very, essentially would not change this property in any way, and that I would offer to pay for whatever cost. It would be done very discreetly, like there would be no noise, or it would be very smooth, like thing, right? And I was very actually quite hopeful that he would like allow this, but in the end he's like, no, I just can't. And I sort of tried to get a reason, but nothing, just no.
Yeah, wow. It's very difficult to have, something on your own property subject to the consent of someone else. So that's very difficult. And so I know I'm pressing you on this topic a little bit, but it's important that I get a firm grasp of everything that's happened so we can, formulate a more effective strategy moving forward. So please tell me anything else that you think is important about the offer that you made to your neighbor to have the hydro line relocated. Can you give me a little bit more detail?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the reason is. Like I said, I'm not sure why he doesn't want me to, doesn't want to allow this. I think that's why I think, in fact, it was him who sort of alerted the city about the pool, like being, in violation of the easement. because otherwise I feel like there's just been so much time since I built the pool, and in 2021 to get this letter that I got from last week. And like I said, I approached my neighbor I think twice, and just sort of reassured him, like, I'll pay for it, and I'll it will be very like seamless process, like you won't even notice. But again, no. So here we are.
Right. Yeah, it's difficult to go back and forth like that. But that's helpful. The info that you've given me so far is helpful. Is there anything else that you can remember about the offer that you made to relocate that line? I know you mentioned that you had offered a specific amount. Can you tell me a little bit more about the offer itself? How many times you made that offer, if the price increased at all, just, with a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so I think I'm pretty confident that I approached him twice. The first time I offered the amount that I brought up, the dollar amount, was basically just to cover the work itself, right? Like to hire the workers and sort of, the whole thing. And then the second time, I thought perhaps I should, sort of give him like an incentive, right? Like to incentivize him. So I would cover the work in addition to, I think it's about 2,500 for the work, like for the materials and for the whole thing. And I may have offered him about $1,000 extra, just on top, to sort of as an incentive. But it seems like you're just not budging at all. So
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, and you have no idea why he wouldn't be interested in doing that. And yeah, that seems like a kind of a mystery. But that gives me a better sense of what's happened so far. Now I just have a couple more kind of specific questions about this topic. So when did you make those two offers to pay to relocate?
So I got as I said earlier, I sort of was surprised that the city granted the permits, because I knew, I was a little worried that they wouldn't actually for the other structures, right? Because again, on top of the easement. So in my back of my mind, I said, there's always a possibility that they would come back for the pool because it's on top of the easement. So I think after I received the infraction in 2017, I want to say maybe 2018. Like, I'm just trying to work through the timeline here. So I think in 2018, maybe like in the summer, is when I approached my neighbor and tried to sort of, like I said, basically in 2018, like in the summer.
Yeah, no, thank you. I understand that the dates are really hard. I can barely remember what I had for dinner yesterday.
Exactly.
So recalling these dates is, it's very, like, thank you. It's a lot of effort, I'm sure, mentally. And so summer 2018, that's for both offers. You made both offers within the same summer, is what you're saying?
Yeah, same summer. I think maybe like a month apart, but yeah, same summer.
Okay, and so have you communicated your willingness to pay for the relocation to the city?
No, I have not. I think maybe that's something that maybe I should consider, but at this point, I have not.
Okay, and so just to follow up on that, have you communicated your willingness to pay for the relocation to Hydro?
No, I have not. No.
Okay, that's good to know. And so I just want to confirm one of my initial questions that I wanted to ask you is how much you think it would cost to pay for the relocation. I think you mentioned 2,500. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, I think that was the amount. Yeah.
Okay, and I just want to confirm that you are willing to pay that whole price.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's stop here for a moment. I want to take a minute to summarize everything you've told me thus far about your offer to pay for the conduit. I just want to ensure that I have your story right. So you mentioned to me that your friend is a hydro expert. He said that the cable could be moved only a couple feet to solve the entire issue, but that would be something that would require your neighbor's consent, because I believe that it would be moved to your neighbor's property. So upon hearing that, you made a couple offers to your neighbor over summer 2018. Your neighbor declined both offers, and you're not sure why. Your first offer was to cover the cost, which you've said is about $2,500. And the second offer included an incentive from you of about $1,000 in addition to you covering the cost to kind of sweeten the deal for your neighbor. He still refused. And so you've mentioned, throughout the interview that you have tension with your neighbor, and you think that might be the reason why he is refusing to, have the work done on his property. You've mentioned a couple times that, that you think the neighbor might be the reason that all of this has kind of happened. There, like I said, you've mentioned there is tension between you two. And then in our last kind of portion discussing the relocation, you've mentioned that you haven't communicated your willingness to pay for this, or your willingness to cover the cost of this option or this solution to the city or to Hydro. And then I confirmed with you that you would be willing to pay the whole amount to move the relocation. Ideally, not, and ideally there would be no cost to you, but in reality, you said you'd be willing to pay that amount. Have I missed anything?
No, you've got every point. Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, great. And is there anything else that you'd like to share on this point?
No, not at this time. No, if something comes up, I'll be sure to let you know.
Definitely. That's something that I stressed at the beginning, that there's an open line of communication between you and I. If anything comes up, feel free. You can email me. It doesn't just stop here after today's interview, right? I understand that this is a long time ago. Things come up. I totally understand.
Thank you.
All right, Julius. I want to pause and situate us here as we're kind of approaching the conclusion of our meeting. So as you'll recall, I first got an overview of the issue that you're having, including some preliminary goals and concerns that you had. Second, you provided me with a step-by-step timeline of your story. Then just now in the third phase of the interview, we delved into 3 topic areas in your case, which were first, the previous permit, which you were granted. Second, the infraction and the guilty plea that you had entered into regarding the pool. And third, your offers to pay to relocate the hydro line. So you've given me a lot of info here to work with, and I think we're caught up and kind of on the same page now, which is great, and that's kind of where we are. So I really appreciate all the helpful information you've given me. I know this is a stressful time and an uncertain time for you. So that being said, I think it's time we conclude and wrap things up as neatly as we can. So the next step for me in the grand scheme of this process is to look over my notes, review the relevant case law and legislation, and evaluate what our best options are. And so moving forward, I'm going to do some research this week, and perhaps we can meet next Wednesday. At that point, I'll have a few options for you on how to proceed. I'll provide you with some legal advice on how I think you should proceed. And then we can discuss a more robust strategy moving forward. So does Wednesday morning work for you?
Yeah, that works perfect.
Great. So I'll make a note, and my assistant will reach out after our meeting to schedule the appointment by email. So you should expect that. I'd also like to confirm my authority to act on your behalf in the meantime as your lawyer. So this means that if Hydro reaches out to me, I have authority to speak on your behalf. I will let you know if they reach out and what they say, and I'll also get instructions from you on how you'd like me to respond to them in that event, just to let you know. So that's kind of what my responsibility is going forward. For you, I do have a few tasks as well. I'd like you to send me a copy of the permit, the ticket issued by the city, The letter, the
Mhm.
joint letter from the city and hydro that you received last week, and
Yep.
perhaps a mock-up invoice of the costs to relocate the conduit, as drawn up by your friend who is, you said he's a hydro expert.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay, great. So
So
it
I've
would be
made a
great if
note.
you could, perfect. Yeah, it would be great if you could get me those documents by email by tomorrow afternoon. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that works for me. Yep.
Okay, great. I only say tomorrow afternoon just because I know we have that those 30 days that were outlined in the letter. So I want to get this moving as quick as possible, just so we kind of know where we're going and what our plan is.
Mhm.
So final check-in before we kind of head our separate ways until next Wednesday. Did you have any other questions or concerns you wanted to bring up?
No, I think you've basically addressed everything, and I feel pretty like good now. Sort of, I feel like there's something being done about this. So no, like that's pretty much it. So I thank you.
Excellent. I'm glad you feel that way. We're gonna get ahead of this, and things will become clearer kind of as we go on. So hope that you're not too stressed out. I know that it can be a stressful situation, but I'm on your side,
Mm.
and hopefully, like I said, we'll come to a suitable solution for you.
Sounds great. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thanks for meeting with me, and my assistant's going to follow up with you after our meeting now.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Okay, great. Thanks.